Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to. Stop dropping stuff. Welcome back to What's in the Playlist today. Today I'm going to talk about the Smiths' debut album, self-titled The Smiths, an image of which you will see here. Smiths were formed in the early 1980s. Guitarist Johnny Marr and Stephen Morrissey met at a concert and became friends over their shared interests, started writing music together. Morrissey chose the band name The Smiths because he figured it was the most ordinary name out there, and he's like, I think it's time for ordinary people to write music, which to me sounds kind of pretentious, but knowing what I know about Morrissey, that's pretty much on point. When they first started making an album, they'd been touring and stuff. Their album was recorded between, as touring dates allowed. They signed up with one guy. Sorry, I have notes. A guy named Troy Tate. In a basement studio in the middle of a heat wave, which Marr said was just made it very difficult to record. It was very uncomfortable, and it also kept the high heat, made it difficult to keep their instruments in tune. The band was really unsatisfied with the sound. Showed it to another guy named John Porter, who agreed to re-record the album with them. And while there were some differences of opinion, my personal opinion is that the debut album is pretty tight. It's pretty solid. Upon release, reviews were mixed. They praised Marr's what they called jangly guitar playing and Morrissey's intricate and well thought out and evocative lyrics, but many people were critical of Morrissey's subject material. He wrote about things which made people uncomfortable. One of his songs, he openly states, I'm not sure how well it states in lyrics, but he had an intimate encounter with an older woman, which left him feeling inadequate. An older, more experienced woman, which left him feeling, somewhat overwhelmed and, inadequate. And the fact that he mentions things of a sexual nature and other things too, really, really put some people off. One of the songs there was some controversy about, "Suffer the Little Children," is about the Moors murders, which 5 children were assaulted and murdered in the town where Morrissey grew up. So people thought he was being exploitive, writing about the murder of children to make money. But at least one of the family members who had lost a child reached out to him and spoke with him, and he convinced him that this was, this was something that affected him deeply, and he was writing to tell his story, not to try and profit off the murder of children, which I think is good. The cover of the album was actually a cropped still image from a movie. The movie was titled Flesh. I don't know anything about the film, but it was deliberately chosen because it looks like it was torn out of a magazine. Morrissey, selected the images for all the covers of their albums. And this one was chosen specifically because it looked like something that had come from a cheap magazine that someone had just torn the ratty cover off of. Of the Smiths' musical style, they're classified as, indie alternative rock, that kind of thing. But their musical style is really hard to pin down. Morrissey's voice and his lyrics tend to sound morose and sad and mournful, even when he's talking about happy things. They have lots of musical influences. Marr's musical influences are varied. Jimi Hendrix, The Who, and other bands too. And Morrissey was actually influenced a lot by female singers from the 50s and 60s. So, you know, it's like I said, I find their musical style to really I mean, yeah, it's kind of indie rock. They're also part of that wave of British independent and alternative artists that came into the US in the late 80s, early 90s. There was something I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, and along with being critical acclamation, stuff like that. The the album itself, despite its mixed reviews, did very well in the charts, at least in Britain. It peaked at number 2 in the UK charts. Did it? Was it? Maybe, I'm not sure. I know it peaked very high in UK. It also peaked very high in Canada. US charts are only hit like 150, so not very popular in the United States. But the Smiths as a band and this album was kind of like considered very influential. It has become to be considered influential in the alternative music scene. And from my own personal background, the band itself was introduced to me by a high school friend, you know, someone who I had kept in touch with on and off. I wound up moving back to my hometown for a little while, get my act together, and bumped into him, wound up reconnecting with him, hanging out with him. He started playing the Smiths albums. Like, this is awesome. I love this stuff. Morrissey has become a bit controversial in recent years due to his opinions on certain subjects, which I will not mention here. But this debut album itself is a good, solid start. And as I said, the Smiths were very influential in the alternative music scene. If you have an interest in that style of music, I would certainly give it a listen. In my opinion, it's not their best album. Not my favorite album, but it is a solid album. There's some really good songs on here. And Morrissey is an excellent writer. Just, you know, he's just lyrically, he writes poetry. And he has an interesting voice and an interesting style to singing. So that's my review of this album. I liked it. Maybe you would too, as usual. As always, my stuff is crap. No, as always, thank you for watching. As always, my stuff is crap. And until next time, good hunting.